Here's the deal. Zoom out. Tariffs are problematic, right? This is like a weird thing. It's not consistent. But like for Canadians, it seems like the bigger issue is that all of these tariffs seem to be in service of turning the country into the 51st state. He keeps talking about that and like in a less and less joking way.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested because I don't talk to a lot of Canadians because they're gross and they disgust me. But I would love to hear, like, do you have a Canadian POV on like what that means?
Wait. Remind me, and I guess everybody watching.
Yeah.
You born in Canada,
Yeah.
came here.
Yeah, so a brief backstory on me. I am a Canadian immigrant to the U.S. I was born in Canada. I grew up in Canada when I was young. I like permanently, I moved around a bunch when I was really young to the UK, back to Canada, to the U.S., back to Canada. Permanently moved to the U.S. in 6th grade. And I lived on a border town in northern Washington. So I literally lived on the Canadian border.
Okay.
Like growing up, one of my cross-country practices was they would take us to the border, drop us off at the border crossing, and then we had to run back to high school.
Awesome.
And so that was a little experience of
ICE would never let you do that today.
they would never, dude. Okay, and this is
Just a Canadian child running from the border into America.
you know what's funny? It's so like when people talk about like border security and things like that right now, I always joke about what the Canadian border is actually like growing up because I'm not kidding. The border in Canada, like the border between Canada and the US, and like where I grew up, it's a ditch about the width of this table. Like I would be running to back to high school on this side, and then
We're
5
gonna
feet
make
away.
Canada pay for it. We're digging the ditch and we're gonna make Canada pay for it.
It's well known Canadians can't climb.
That's a well-known fact.
And then if you
They fall and stumble.
Poor balance.
Poor balance.
and then you're literally a hop away from jumping into Canada. It's very easy.
Sure.
Like if you wanted to hop the border, I
Yeah,
guess.
with a bag full of fentanyl, which I do occasionally.
And then
money.
that's kind of the circumstance that I grew up in. And also there's a lot of like kind of basic economic ties in that area. Like a really common thing is like if you went to the Costco in our area on Sundays, like 80% of the cars in the Costco parking lot would be British Columbia license plates. Like it's like
They're just driving over the border for Costco. And then
people that live in Canada come
Costco's
down
our
to buy
greatest
goods.
export as a nation. I
Right.
swear to God,
The
everyone
fentanyl
loves
there
it.
is super cheap.
Well, you
You
buy
know,
it.
that would put the dealers out of business.
You
if
buy it in
Costco
bulk.
had
Yeah.
fentanyl,
Yeah.
That's
They pair it. You buy it, you get a free soda on the side.
no. Oh my God. I
you
mean,
get your hot dog, your fentanyl, and then who knows? You go in for the fentanyl, you come out with a TV.
if you think the cartels can offer a remotely comparable experience to a Costco,
Oh,
the consumer will choose the Costco every time. It's just a better experience.
So pitching the cartels, being like, I'm telling you, man, if you kill a few less people, you put some TVs up front and you sell and you give
you
them
put a hot dog for cheap.
you give them cheese samples,
yeah.
they'll buy so much more fentanyl.
Yeah. You give them fentanyl samples, they'll buy so much more fentanyl.
the Costco fentanyl sample. Woo.
Whoa. Just people like passed out on the fucking concrete at Costco. It's like an aisle full of
Guy with
people.
19 disguises on his 30th time for the fucking fentanyl samples line.
I think that, but yeah. So my family's Canadian. Pretty much all of my family lives in Canada, except for my parents and like my brothers. Basically.
Okay.
I decided to like call a few people.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. Yeah, I wanted to.
So just to get like a general vibe on what's going on, because I think you've talked about this quite a bit, and this is like I think a somewhat well understood topic, is like Canada's kind of also in a bit of an economic crisis in general right now.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Like the dollar.
People are struggling.
Like I remember growing up, there was a period of time, my dad got paid in Canadian dollars because he worked out of Canada, even though we lived in the US. So there was a time when the Canadian dollar was like worth more than the US dollar growing up.
That's
like
crazy.
for like a year, and then basically on par for a long time. But now it's like, I think it's like
less.
70 cents
Oof.
to the dollar.
I made a video game with a Canadian developer, and so we got paid. We got our pay on Steam, and he's like, "I need to pay you now because every day it sits here, you're losing money as the Canadian dollar devalues."
It is so bad.
It's like it was like losing big percentages of what we got paid.
And I think the real estate crisis there is pretty out of control. Like housing is in the biggest cities in Canada is even more relatively unaffordable than it is in like the biggest US cities. And there's all these like economic issues in Canada that, from loosely talking to my friends prior to this, that they're grappling with. Like they're worried about their prospects of a future. and especially if they like went to college and like have a specialized profession they're supposed to go into, working in Canada kind of sucks because if you could get a job in the US, you could get paid way more.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't know about until recently is the fact that there's the trade agreement where basically if you're a professional in certain categories, but in most like good categories, and then you get a job offer from the US, you just get to come here. Like you don't have to like get a visa. If you get a US job offer, this is part of what was previously NAFTA. And so if you're a Canadian professional and you're like an accountant or a software engineer and you get a job from an American company, you just go to the border. You don't even have to pre-plan this. And you're like, I'm here. Here's the job offer. Here's all the stuff.
Dang.
You just get let in.
I didn't know this until really recently.
And so it's a huge brain drain, like because it's that easy. And it's just like, oh, if Google in the US is going to pay you 3 times as much relative, you can just go, which is wild. So like 10,000 people do that a year.
Canada is trying to deal with this too, apparently, because so I read this article that I pulled up, and this was focusing on Canadian to U.S. Immigration in 2022, and from the previous year, it had more than doubled the amount of Canadians leaving Canada to go to the U.S. In that year, and it seems to be an interesting like split among like age groups and like why people are going. There's a quote from an immigration lawyer in that article where he talks about most of the inquiries he's getting now are from young people that are like looking to move for financial
Just desperate
reasons.
to get out.
I actually tried to call the lawyer today and like ask him about like what it's like right now. And they didn't get back to me, but I called my one other relative that lives in the US is my cousin, and she works in biotech, and she moved to San Diego with her also Canadian boyfriend a few years ago. And I was letting her kind of break it down for me. And she's like, at the end of the day, like it just came to like money and like my profession. And she says like all the people in her field and like who studied with her in Canada also want to move to the US because she gets 3x her pay down here.
Yeah.
And she pays like a comparable amount in taxes. So like financially, it makes sense. And then even if she wants to go back to Canada, and I think a lot of people in her situation, it sounds like they would want to go back to Canada
Like
one day, they can save money faster to buy a home in Canada when they go back. And so that's like her experience as someone who's already made the move, right?
Speaking of homes, can I show this?
Are you going to show my actual home and my address?
Yeah, I'm going to show your home and address and your dad and where he lives. And
You can draw on it.
this is
Here at Lemonade Stand.
I remember this, yeah.
oh sure.
Yeah. Here at Lemonade Stand, we have fancy Telestrator technology
on it,
to
Aiden.
really make it a worse experience for the audio listeners.
I just think
you're
if people
see-
don't
you're
know
gonna look
about
right
Canada,
here.
like if
You're gonna look right here. That's actually Atrioc's real home.
yeah, I commute from Toronto.
That's
I got a $2.5 million shack in Toronto.
fun fact. Ari is not allowed to leave the house between 9 and 5.
That's for religious reasons. But anyway, Canada's real estate market, if you don't know, is like one of the worst in the world. Basically, every major city, the prices have gotten astronomical. They had no 2008, 2009 housing bubble. Like they had it, but they didn't pop it the way we had it here. So it just kept growing.
Weird.
And it's continued to grow. And at this point, like any Canadian you talk to talks about how they'll just never own a home. Like essentially at their wages.
They've like given up.
They've given up
prospect.
completely. Yeah.
So this is the interesting thing to me is like I was reading this article and I was like, this makes sense. Like the thing that my parents tell me all the time is like the reason we moved to the US or the reason we wanted to be in the US was it afforded me like job and like economic opportunity that we wouldn't have had in Canada.
She knew
and
you'd make dick jokes on a podcast one
exactly.
day.
And I said, Mom, you're right. I never could have made it doing this work in Vancouver. But I think that shared story is very similar between all the people I talked to. It's like, it basically like they had some sort of specialized job, like especially like software engineers as an example that I can think of.
In the tech industry, when I was still in the tech industry, so many Canadian software engineers, like so many companies in Silicon Valley have a Canadian branch, like really smart people. And then again, now with these new rules, they've been here for a while, but like those people can just come to the US now and just make way more.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like the financial aspect of it is the key mover on that over kind of everything else. Because I ended up talking to another close friend of mine that still lives. He lives in Alberta. He lives in Calgary, and he's trying to get a job in like finance right now. And I was like, what is like for you who's in Canada trying to find a job in Canada? How do things feel to you right now? And he's like, well, things are pretty like doomer here in terms of like economic, like owning a home, like the job market's really bad. It's tough to find work if you're a young person, even like if you're a new college grad.
Right.
And these things are all like shared frustrations among my friends. But then, and a big question I wanted to answer is like, okay, this trend of like people leaving Canada for the US because of pay, like primarily because of pay, or maybe like the data that I looked into, there's a ton of retirees as well, like wealthier Canadians that want to move
They
like
want to live somewhere
to
else.
Florida, or they want to move somewhere with like lower taxes where they can settle down and it's warmer. The question that I wanted to answer was, okay, so you can see this trend in immigration happening, but is it still happening in 2024 and now in 2025, which was not in this census data? Like it doesn't go up to that point yet. And I was really curious because like politically things are changing so significantly right now. And then on top of that, it's like not just the general politics of someone like Trump being elected in the first place, but the follow-up of the tariffs and the 51st state rhetoric.
It's even more of a squeeze. Yeah.
And my friend was talking about how even in Alberta, which is a place that's in Canada pretty conservative, and has more people than like BC would that are like Trump sympathetic or maybe fans of Trump from like the Canadian side.
Yeah.
He's never seen this level of anger among like all people. People there, my relatives, my friend is saying all of his relatives and his friends, everybody I talk to that lives in Canada is angry. They are like, this is fucked up that this is happening. Like, fuck the US. This is kind of what brings us together right now. And the idea of like, he said it's like the highest sense of like national pride he's seen in a long time, where it's like, you know, fuck the States. It's like, we're Canadians. And that plays into people's idea or the appeal of moving into the US too. He was like, compared to like a year ago, I think a lot
poison
of
us from the inside.
They used to want to poison us from the inside, but now they don't even want to get in. So maybe it's working. Maybe it's working in that regard. We're keeping the Canadians out.
The Albertans are like, how are we gonna get over that ditch?
It's
insurmountable.
Big ditch.
I thought it was really interesting to hear him say, like, if you asked me or my friends a year ago and offered me a similar salary in the US for some type of job, I might have said yes, but now I would definitely say no. And the difference, but then the overarching like economic theme here is like, he was like, but I would still say yes if the pay was like
double
way,
or
way
triple,
higher.
right? People are still gonna.
And that was like what my cousin was wrestling with too, is that she's like, I don't like the political direction of the country. I don't know how long I want to stay here, but my career and my pay is so high here that I can't leave
money
yet.
talks, right? Yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on is like, I think my parents are different. They're very proud to be American and they feel like more obligated to defend to the rest of my family, like why they live in the States and like why they like chose to live here basically. But the rest of my family is like dogging them for it.
For just being in America?
They're very angry about the 51st state rhetoric, all of the tariffs and like how they're going to suffer economically.
I've got a Canadian friend and I have been making 51st state jokes, obvious jokes, right? For a little while now. And then recently he's like, hey, I don't think it's funny anymore. Like, he told me just privately, he's like, I know you don't mean it, but like, I don't like it anymore. Cause it's seeming more and more serious politically. It seems like, you know, Trump said it as a joke at first and now he keeps saying like, he keeps calling it Governor Trudeau. He keeps saying like, you know, and so they're like, they just don't want to have their sovereignty threatened so regularly by the neighbors of the South with all the nukes. Canada has no nukes, by the way. So I wanted to bring this up too. I got two things I wanted to bring up. One is that this is the craziest outcome that I ever could have expected. Recently, like a few days ago, a Canadian politician went to the UK and they're trying to get a deal where the UK's nuclear umbrella applies to Canada.
Oh my God.
So they're going to like Canada, to UK and France to make a world where theoretically the UK would be threatening the United States with nuclear war if the United States invaded Canada.
Wow.
Like how crazy are things getting? That's how wild, you know.
A major turnaround from,
from like
a year ago. Like what? From like 2 months ago. Like that's,
and I just didn't expect Canada specifically to get involved in this. I didn't expect this to become a Canadian. What are you double gunsing us?
I'm picking a side.
Oh yeah.
Okay, a number to reiterate this, which I think is so interesting, is like you might have seen this like 2 decades ago, something like that. The amount of people coming in and out of Canada to the U.S. was like it was like a few thousand on either side, net in a given year. And there was even a year or two where there was more people going into Canada than out. And then the most recent tract was like 126,000, right? Or like
That was in
80,000
2022.
2022, right? So like, just to give a sense, it is massive, the amount of people who are going from Canada to the US 2 years ago. And then you're right. It's like, is that going to increase? Is that going to get,
that's
like in 20, like this year, is that going to get even worse because of economic conditions? Like the amount of Canadians who are immigrating to America now is gigantic compared to any amount in the past for like a 2 to 3 year period. Right after COVID, it just like shot way up.
Well, no wonder things are getting worse here. There's so many damn Canadians.
If they would just stay in their own state.
I don't think you should make jokes like that anymore.
The friend was Aiden.
Told you in confidence.
I told you in confidence.